Hey, so for this week, I have a promising practice. My promising practice is regular practice of writing and the use of various writing exercises correlates with student achievement on exams, as well as preparing them for the writing prompts they will be asked to respond to on the AP exam. So on the AP Gov exam, students are asked to answer 4 different types of FRQs or free response questions. So they have to answer a concept application question, which gives them some sort of scenario, and they have to respond to it. A quantitative analysis question, which is looking at a chart and answering questions based on the chart. A Supreme Court comparison question, where they have to compare and contrast 2 Supreme Court cases, and then an argument essay question, where they have to respond to the prompt with a thesis and use evidence to support their thesis. So those are the 4 types of essays that we have been practicing in class. So the data that I have here, I compare the number of students who have received a perfect score on each of the 3 argument essays that we've done so far this year. So we have practiced all 4 different types of open response questions or FRQ questions. So we've done each of them, but I've tried to really hit on the argument essay just because there's so much more involved in those types of responses. And I want to make sure that they're aware on how to construct their thesis and use reasoning to make sure that that evidence that they choose supports their thesis. So that's why I've chosen this data. The second 2 charts are going to compare the test scores of students with their scores on the most recent FRQ that we completed in class. So I try to do a practice FRQ at least every single unit that we do, if not more. I've also included screenshots from a survey where I asked students just to kind of what their comfort level was in terms of writing these FRQ responses, as well as their opinions on some of the different exercises that we've done in class. So the first one are the argument essay scores. So these are just the scores for those students who received a perfect score. So how many students received a perfect score? Now, other students did well on these responses, but this is just perfect score. So data is kind of hard to really gain anything from it, I guess, just because it's hard to tell from my standpoint whether or not they're really confused or if they're just not really putting forth a whole lot of effort from that virtual setting. So it can be a little hard to tell, but on average, it's stayed about the same as far as how many students are scoring those perfect scores or doing well. I've seen the most improvement from my 5th period class, which I see as a positive just because out of my AP Gov classes, that's my lowest level class. So to see that I've had them improve and had more students do well on these argument essays, which again, I think are the most difficult types of responses, that's a really good thing. That's a positive thing for me. As far as FRQ scores compared to test scores, if students scored well on their FRQs, and I'm using the rubrics provided by College Board, if they do well on their FRQs, then they're generally doing well on their exams. So they're getting an A or a high B on their exam. So to me, that says they know the material and they're comfortable with it. So not only are they able to write about it and put it into that context, but they can also answer multiple questions about it as well. So in that sense, the writing has helped because they're doing this FRQ before they actually take the exam. And then as far as questions that I asked my students just to kind of see how they feel, gauge how comfortable they are with it. One of them was, I know how to construct a thesis statement and develop an argument. And none of them said no. So that made me feel pretty good about that they are familiar with that concept. Responding to argument essay prompts has gotten easier over the course of the school year. I think I have 1 no response. So for the most part, they're feeling pretty comfortable with it and they're doing better. And then FRQ outline assignments, which is one exercise that I've used that I'll talk about in just a second, have helped me break down and further understand how to answer each part of the argument essay. And I got a pretty good response on that as well. And then I just asked, are there any other strategies that you feel would be beneficial in helping improve your writing? Because definitely after spring break, when we come back and we're reviewing, we're really going to hone in on the writing even more. So some are just saying practice those different FRQs. I had another student say they really like the outlines. So like I said, we've done a lot of writing in AP Gov this year. That's something that I really wanted to try to pick up on after last year's AP exams were all open response or FRQ questions. So I wanted to make sure that they were prepared to answer all of the writing prompts. We've done at least one FRQ with every unit. In some cases, we've done more than that. We've practiced all of the different types. We've also looked at examples from past exams. So I've pulled up the prompt from the last exam as well as sample responses so that they can see, hey, this is what makes a good response and this is a not so good response. And they can kind of look at the rubric and see how scores graded those responses and what goes into a good response and a not so good response. So that's one exercise that we've done. Another thing that I've done, especially with these argument essay questions, because I've found that students tend to have the hardest time with these, is breaking it down into what I've called an outline. And essentially, it's taking that essay, okay, and I think that term essay sometimes overwhelms them, and breaking it down so they're answering it in sections instead of just writing out a full essay. So with these outlines, as I've called them, they're doing everything that they have to do in this open response question, but they're just kind of chunking it to get practice thinking about, well, how could I respond to this prompt? So I have them construct their thesis statement, and then I have them use evidence, just kind of briefly explain, well, how could I use this piece of evidence to support my thesis? And they just kind of briefly write about that. Then they have to have an outside piece of evidence, so something that's not from one of these documents that's provided to them. So that's getting them thinking, well, what's something else that we've learned in class or talked about in class that I could use to support my thesis? And then they also have to refute an opposing viewpoint. So I have them do that as well. So essentially, it's breaking down each part of that argument essay that they have to respond and just taking away that overwhelming word essay. So it's really just getting them thinking in terms of how could I respond to this type of question. And I've done a couple of these with them so far, and they actually do better on these outlines sometimes than they do on the full essay when they write it all out. So I found that this is a good way to try to get them to practice thinking in terms of how to answer these type of FRQs. So we've practiced writing a lot. We've done different exercises. I've also got plans to have them start reviewing their own FRQs. So at this point in the year, I've gone through, I've graded and scored them and explained to them why I've scored their FRQs the way that I have. So if they lost a point, I've explained, hey, you didn't do what the prompt asked you to do. You need more of this here or something like that. So instead, I'm going to they're still going to be practicing that writing process, but I want them to look at the rubric and really score their own response. And Mr. Conforti shared something with me that I think will really be helpful, kind of tweaking it for AP Gov and having them just grade their own questions. How would you score this? How would you score your writing? So we've done a lot of practice with writing this year. I do think that it's helped them as far as actually preparing for tests in class, because we do our FRQs generally the day before. So they're already having to kind of review that content. So they've done well on the exams if they've done well on the FRQs. And then, of course, I want them to be really prepared for the AP exam and know what to expect from each of those FRQ prompts. So those 4 different prompts, how to answer them. Now, this isn't without any challenges. Like I said, it can be kind of hard to know when they're not face-to-face. Do they know how to answer these prompts? Are they confused? Are they lost? Or are they just not watching the videos that have been provided with them and putting forth full effort? So that is kind of one challenge that I've faced as far as writing. But all the way around, I found that practicing writing and using different types of writing exercises has been beneficial all the way around, especially in an AP level class.